It is Black History Month. I did my eyebrows and I cut some of my skin, but I wound up putting some Olay on it, some Olay oil, so that it can heal. So yeah, don't mind the scars. Um, okay, so like I said, I was a curious child, and this woman, brought it to my attention that it was Black History Month when she was rebelling through her grandmother's stuff, and she found something interesting. And it brought to my attention that I also found something interesting to kind of um, give a shout out to Black History Month. So a long time ago, um, I was in the attic, and in my attic is like, how you got all of your parents' old stuff. So yeah, I was in the attic, and behind the windowsill, because I think I was putting something up there, and behind the windowsill of the attic, I found this. And this is, as you can see, something very ancient. Martin Luther King Jr. I've been to the mountaintop. And this was delivered at Mason Temple, Memphis, Tennessee, April 3rd, 1968. Interesting. So yeah, I haven't got a chance to read it, but I will read some of it. It's kind of hard to read because of the texture of it. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of it. So it starts off, "And shoes to wear down here. It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey, but God has commanded us to be concerned about the the slums down here. And his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the New Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about the New York and New Atlanta, the New Philadelphia and New Los Angeles, the New Memphis, Tennessee. This is what we have to do. Now, the other thing we'll have to do is this: always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Never stop and forget that collectively. That means all of us together collectively, we are richer than all nations in the world, and with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, and I can name the others, the American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all of sorts of the United States and more, than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right there, if we knew how to pull it. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktail. We just need to go around to these stores and to the massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you are not treating his children right. And we've come here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment. There's God's children, fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow, and our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. And so as a result of this, we are asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy Celsius milk. Tell them not to buy, what is the other bread? Wonder Bread? And what is the other bread company? Jesse? Tell them not to buy the Hearts bread. And Jesse Jackson, has said, up to now, only the garbage man has been feeling pain. Now we must kind of redistribute the pain. We are choosing these companies because they haven't been fair in our hiring policies. And we are choosing them because they can begin to process of saying they are going to support the needs and the rights of these men who are on strike. And then they can move on downtown and tell Mayor Loeb to do what is right. But not only that, we've got to strengthen black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money into Tri-State Bank. We want the bank and movement in Memphis, so go by the Savings and Loan Association. I'm not asking you something that we don't do ourselves in SCLC. Judge Hooks and others will tell you that we have an account here in the Savings and Loan Association from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We're telling you to follow what we're doing. Put your money there. You have 6 or 7 black insurance companies here in the city of Memphis. Take out your insurance there. We want to have an insurance in. Now, these are some practical things that we can do. We begin the process of building a greater economic base, and at the same time, we are putting pressure where it really hurts. I ask you to follow through here. Now, let me say, as I move to my conclusion, that we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. We've got to see it through. And when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. One day a man came to Jesus and he wanted to raise some questions about some vital matter of life. At points he wanted to trick Jesus and show him that he knew a little more than Jesus knew and throw him off base. Now that question could have easily ended up in a philosophical and theological debate, but Jesus immediately pulled that question from midair and placed it on a dangerous curve between Jerusalem and Jericho. And he talked about a certain man who fell among thieves. You remember that a Levite and a priest passed by on the other side? They didn't stop to help him. And finally a man of another race came by. He got down from his beast, decided not to be compassionate by proxy. But he got down with him, administered first aid, and helped the man in need. Jesus ended up saying, this was a good man. This was a great man, because he had the capacity to project the I onto the thou and to be concerned about his brother. Now, you know, we use our imagination a great deal to try to determine why the priest and the Levite didn't stop. At times we say they were busy going to a church meeting in a celestial gathering, and they had to get on down to Jerusalem so they wouldn't be late for their meeting. At other times we would speculate that there was a righteous law that one who was engaged in righteous ceremonials was not to touch a human body 24 hours before the ceremony. And every now and then we begin to wonder whether maybe they were not going down to Jerusalem or down to Jericho, rather to organize a Jericho Road Improvement Association. That's a possibility. Maybe they felt that it was better to deal with the problem from the casual route rather than to get bogged down with individual effects. But I am going to tell you that what my imagination tells me. It's possible that those men were afraid. You see, the Jericho Road is a dangerous road. I remember when Miss King and I was first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And as soon as we got on the road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parable. It's a winding, meandering road. It's really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is about 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho, 15 or 20 minutes later, you're about 2,200 feet below sea level. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the Bloody Path. And you know, it's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over at the man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around, or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking, and he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them there for quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a great determination, and let us move on in these powerful days. In these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be, we have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" I was looking down writing and I said yes. And the next minute I felt something beating on my chest before I knew it. I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon, and that blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out of the New York Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I have received one from the President and the Vice President. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I received a visit and a letter from the Governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at the letter, and I'll never forget it. It simply said, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School," she said. While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering, and I had read that if you had sneezed, you would have died, and I'm simply writing you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight that I, too, am happy that I didn't sneeze. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in America, in the American dream, and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961, when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation and interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I would have been around here in 1962, wouldn't have. When Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up, and whenever a man and woman straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere. Because a man can't ride your back unless it's bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963 when the black people of Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama, to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, now, it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us, the pilot said over the public address system. We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. And to be sure that all of the bags were checked and to be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. And we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. And then I got to Memphis, and some began to say the threats or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I am happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I've been to the mountaintop. Copyright 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., used by permission from Intellectual Properties Management, Atlanta, Georgia, manager of the King Estate. So yeah, this is a historical document about the Martin Luther King Jr. This article, I've been to the mountain. And this is what it looks like. So yeah. Happy Black History Month to you all, and I hope y'all enjoyed the read.